Hello and welcome to Bulimia Sucks. I'm your host, Kate Hudson-Hall, and thank you so much for listening. Now, this is a platform, if you haven't heard about it before, it's a platform for people to share relatable and uplifting and inspiring conversations based on an eating disorder. And episodes will include talking with people who have struggled with an eating disorder, sharing their own personal stories and their difficult journeys, and then their steps taken into recovery. And then also to people who actually have an eating disorder at the present moment, and how maybe they've overcome that eating disorder. And then also with professionals who work with people with eating disorders who may have had their own struggles with and around food issues. So, firstly, I would like to say that my audiobook, if you're interested, is now on Audible and Amazon and iTunes. And if you would be interested and would like a free copy of this, so if you email me at katehudsonhall@gmail.com, I can pop you over the code and you can download it for free. And the other thing that I've been working on, if you haven't heard about it, is I have been writing an anxiety book. So it's got many different techniques and tips and tools in it to help people overcome anxiety. So I'm very excited about that. It is back from the formatters and it's back from the editors. So now I've got to send it off to the formatters to get them working on it. And the book is going to be called Anxiety Hacks. So watch out, keep your ears peeled for the book. So I am super excited with our guest today. Our guest is Simone Yemm. Now, Simone is an author, and she spent more than 3 decades teaching and performing the flute before transitioning into writing and editing by completing a master's in journalism. After hugely difficult life circumstances combined with chronic sleep deprivation, Simone's mental health took a dive into depression, anxiety, and disordered eating. Her mental health completely crumbled, accumulating in 3 psychiatric inpatient admissions. And she is now wading through her recovery, which is fantastic. Simone also, as I mentioned before, is an author, and she has a first book out now, and it's called Stalked by Demons, Guarded by Angels. The Girl with the Eating Disorder, and this only came out just very recently, so you need to everybody check that book out because it's fantastic. So, Simone, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. I'm very excited.
Oh, me too.
You might be able to tell from my accent that I'm a little further away than you are. I'm down in Tasmania in Australia.
Oh, in Tasmania. And how is it down there?
It's very cold. We're heading into winter and there's a touch of snow on our mountain. So I'm all rugged up.
Good. So, well, thank you so much for joining us. Now, let's begin how your pattern of disordered eating, how it sort of like began and took hold and your journey.
In my book, I begin with the phrase, when I was born, I had a body. And then I go on to talk about how my mother put me on a diet when I was 4 weeks old. So my story of disordered eating began way before I remember, because I was quite a chubby baby. I was 10 pound 10. My mother was a very petite little woman, and my grandmother was very small, and both of them were very uncomfortable having this big, round, chubby, red-headed, curly-headed, very pale baby. And so she put me on a diet, and I've got the baby book entry where she says, I can't remember it exactly, but red hair, blue eyes, need to slim her down, chubby cheeks or something, and I love her anyway, and we need to slim her down. So she put me on a diet when I was 4 weeks old, and then and one thing she did say was that she needed to watch my weight, and she spent her entire life up until she passed away at the age of 65 watching my weight, as did my grandmother. as did I, because I don't know any different. So I guess to answer your question, when did it begin? It began at the very beginning. So yeah, so I didn't know any different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that pattern carried on as you got older. They were always cautious about what they would allow you to eat, I suppose.
Yeah, there was a very strong message. I'm always careful not to try and demonize my mother too much, but we're all impacted so much by the people who are around us. And my mother was well-meaning, well-intentioned, but misguided. But yeah, for her, if you weren't slim and pretty, you were not successful. And I have never been slim, and I have never been pretty, or felt pretty, which is just a subjective thing anyway. But for her, they were the foundations to success was to be slim and pretty. It didn't matter how clever you were or how talented you were or what you could do, you had to be slim and pretty. So that message, I still struggle, you know, I'm 56 now, I still struggle with that message. And while logically I can completely understand that, you know, talents are, you know, important and looks are not, it's very, very difficult to rewrite those, you know, early childhood messages.
Those imprints, yeah. Absolutely.
So,
and, you know, and I suppose that, you know, your mother was brought up, you know, with the same views.
She was, exactly, because I was quite close to my grandmother and I cared for her until she died in 2017. And she commented on my weight until her dying day, pretty much. She would pull me aside if I was overweight to have a little chat to me about what I should do about it, just to let me know that I was a bit fat. But if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that fat people know they're fat because somebody's already told them, and we already know, and it was not helpful. But and then when I was slimmer, she would just let me know that my hair was the wrong color, or I didn't have enough makeup on, or I should have worn a different color coat, or very, very appearance based. Good people, like, I want to balance that they were good people and I loved them and I missed them. But very damaging messages. My sister had an eating disorder as well. So it, was in the family. Yeah.
So it must have been difficult to be able to, well, you wouldn't know any different when you were growing up with what, you know, how to eat, you know, how to eat.
No, because I was the mum was petite and my brother and sister had very athletic builds. I'm the eldest child. My dad was a professional runner. He had that very athletic build, but I was round and I had boobs and I had hips and I didn't look like the rest of the family. So yeah, so I would be not allowed to have seconds for meals, or, you know, while my brother and sister could. I'm 5 or 6 years older than they are. So I was just on this perpetual diet, but I was incredibly rebellious, and probably naughty is a potential word you could apply to me. And I would just steal the food and eat it later. So, you know, Mum would say, well, you know, who took that cheesecake, the one that's got big holes dug in it? And I would say, not me, naturally. It was me. So yeah. So I stole food. I stole food from when I was a very, very, very young child. I don't remember not stealing food. I don't do it anymore. But
but you know, it just, you know, it's just a it just proves that by depriving or having food deprived, that's all you'll crave, that's all you'll want. So
it is, yeah.
You know, it's getting to that point of realization that, okay, well, you know, I need to allow myself to have that last piece of chocolate cake, because otherwise I'll go around and eat everything else in the kitchen and then I will eventually end up eating that piece of chocolate cake. And of course, it's, you know, it's having the tools to be able to do that within reason, to be able to, you know, to be able to stay further in control.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been 5 years in recovery from, well, probably 6 years now, trying to recover from all sorts of mental health stuff, but the eating disorder was the biggest one. And you hear it again and again and again, is that you just have to let yourself eat whatever you want. If you put rules down, and I was very good at making food rules, then instinctively there's a part of you that wants to break those rules. And it was only when I came out of the clinic the last time where I don't know, something changed, and I just sort of really accepted that if I felt like eating chocolate for dinner, well, then I would eat chocolate for dinner. And I just ate chocolate for dinner, and I discovered what I'd been told all along is that most of the time you don't feel like chocolate for dinner. Most of the time your body will want,
you're craving,
you know, about, you know, if you let it eat whatever it wants psychologically, then physically my body ends up wanting porridge because I like it and it's got nutritional stuff in it. And I do eat chocolate, and I do eat cake, and I do eat whatever I feel like. And it took a long, long time to get to this place. So,
yeah. And so I suppose when you, I don't know if you left home or when you sort of had time that you could choose the foods that you ate, that was maybe what happened then?
So I left home the day that I finished school, swearing I would never go back because it was a very unhappy place to be. For the first few years, I lived with a girlfriend for 6 months, and we didn't have 2 coins to rub together. So we were living on cheese and biscuits, just because financially we were forced into that position. And that was fine. Then basically I just didn't have a lot of money. So there was kind of restriction, but from a financial point of view. And that went on because I went to university and stuff and didn't have much money at uni. But when food was around, it shames me to say, but I would still, like, because I was a musician, so there'd often be concerts with buffets or, you know, like tables of food afterwards. And I would be the person hovering around the table trying to get the food. I mean, this was when I was in my 20s. I wasn't a child, but I still had that mentality. I mean, right up until a few years ago, I had a mentality of, you know, hovering around the table, seeing what I could put in without, you know, put on my plate without people noticing. And could I come back for seconds and people wouldn't notice? I was bulimic, so I'd spend a lot of years going to and from the bathroom as well. So yeah, I stole food up until quite recently, really. Or not so much stealing as just kind of hoarding food. I had very much in front of other people, I would eat healthy. So I'd eat the salad, wouldn't want to be seen eating the cheesecake. I was vegetarian until I was in my 30s. So, you know, always seen eating the vegetables because you need to be seen to do the right thing. But most of my eating was a hidden kind of thing. So when people weren't looking, and I feel it was a little bit dissociative as well, in that I could look back the next day and not even remember that I'd had donuts or whatever thing that I felt was, you know, bad food. Bad in inverted commas. So yeah, I had to unlearn the concept of good food and bad food and just food.
Yeah, and how did you do that?
So in 2015, my life started unraveling, and just a whole pile of circumstances happened, a lot of grief, a whole pile of things were happening at the same time. And so I went to a psychologist because I'd started to self-harm. I was not in a very good my mental health was very poor. And so that was in 2015, met a wonderful psychologist and started psychology therapies. And then in 2018, I had an inpatient, well, in 2016, I had an inpatient stay for mental health reasons. 2018, I went into an eating disorder clinic. And then in 2020, I was back in the clinic again with a second eating disorder clinic, and walking out of that second clinic. And so I guess I had 5 years of therapy, and I've got a lot of support around me, really good friends and family. So 5 years of therapy in the clinic. I do dialectical behaviour, I did dialectical behaviour therapy, and seeing a psychologist. I think between all those things and an awful lot of reading, I've read a lot of books, like your book, and similar kind of books. that just, you know, share the journey. I mean, there was no one magic thing. I never found it was a case of turn up to one session, walk away with one piece of information and suddenly you're all cured. I think, yeah, unfortunately, there would be no one with an eating disorder if that was the case.
No, we wish that was true. Yeah, it's a whole process, isn't it? It's having that support.
It's having support, and I was very fortunate to have support, and hearing the same message again and again in different ways, which is why I think reading different books is really helpful. Going to different therapies is helpful. I spent a lot of time in group therapy where you would hear other girls, and nearly always girls that were in the therapy, telling their story and what had worked for them and that kind of stuff. And even though it's the same message, you hear it a little bit differently each time, and eventually it just kind of all builds upon each other and you start to take it on as a truth rather than an abstract concept. So
it's, I think when you're in the depths of an eating disorder, it's difficult to believe that you can actually step out of that. So hearing other people's stories that have moved forward in their recovery is so helpful. And like you say, over and over again, reading and podcasts and things and listening, it's just so helpful to understand that you're not alone, but also that people that you can, with the right support, you can overcome this.
Absolutely. And I think because I was older, because I'd sort of struggled with I dabbled in all the eating disorders, but I'd struggled with binge eating probably a huge amount of the time. I was bulimic on and off for many years. I was anorexic the first time I was put into the clinic. But I think people don't think of older women, middle-aged women, mature women as having an eating disorder. It's often seen as a rich white teenage girls kind of problem, which it often might start with teenage girls of any socioeconomic status. But it can, if it's not treated and if you don't get well, that can be a problem that you carry through with you until you find treatment and get better. So,
yeah, absolutely.
But I'd had it sitting with me for 50 years, really, before I started to get well. It's just that things grew. For me, an eating disorder is a symptom of a bigger problem. And so because my problems weren't too big, the eating disorder just sat there kind of nibbling away, for want of a better word, at me, bubbling for a little while, for a long while. And then when everything became really difficult and I didn't have any coping mechanisms, that's when the eating disorder just exploded and went absolutely pear-shaped. But it had always been there. Like if you look back, it had always been there. I became bulimic when I was 22, I think, 22. And that's not normal. It's not normal to voluntarily vomit your food back up. So
no, absolutely. And and that's a good point, because it's not about the food. It's about how you're feeling and different experiences or traumatic experiences that you've had.
And everyone's reason, everyone's history is a little bit different. So someone else might have an eating disorder, but a whole different set of circumstances that led there. Somebody else could experience all my life situations and have no problems whatsoever. I think that there's, my friend describes it as mixing a cake. So you've got a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it all comes together and you end up with a problem. But, I feel like I have genetic vulnerabilities, personality traits that make me vulnerable to an eating disorder. And then I had environmental circumstances that just made it kind of bloom. So, yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about your book. What made you decide that you wanted to write the book?
The book has been an amazing cathartic labour of love. So in 2016, when I first came out of the clinic, the psychiatric clinic, I was encouraged to journal. At that point, I was still a musician. I was kind of transitioning out of music at that point. I was a professional flute player and teacher. but I started journaling. I was pushed into it. I didn't really want to do it, but enough people sort of said you should do it that I buckled. And so I started journaling, and then in October 2016, I loved journaling so much. I made it into a public blog, and I wrote a blog post every day, all mental health related. Some of it was terrible writing. But it was, for me, it was, I have discovered, and this is probably just a me thing, that I can express myself on paper in a way that I can't always with the spoken word. So when I'm okay, if things are bubbling along okay, and my life is trotting along really nicely, I can talk till the cows come home. It's not a problem. But if life gets really stressful or I'm going through a bout of depression or really bad anxiety or something, then I'll just shut down and I can't talk at all. And that's when I will write. And so I discovered that in 2016, and I had this blog. And it just kind of kept growing. So I just wrote the blog posts, still did some private journaling for things that weren't really suitable for public viewing. And then about 2017, 2018, I'm not sure when, my husband put me onto a couple of writing courses, and then I got a writing mentor, and people read what I was writing and just really, really encouraged me. And so I started to formulate the story into a book. It's taken me forever to write it. So it probably took me 2 years to write the book. Yeah. And my story finishes around 2019 because it's taken me another 2 years to edit and publish it. It's a much slower process than I thought, but yeah, so probably 2 years of writing, being really strongly encouraged by people who'd read the story and said, we need to get that out there, because there's a lot of universal themes in it of the experiences that women have of body image, external. You know, I'm not the only woman that's had random people comment on their body. You know, I had complete strangers sort of stop me and go, how, you know, what happened to you? You used to be so thin. She was just a stranger that walked past me on the beach. And, you know, those kind of messages run deep, but I mean, every woman I know has a story, whether or not they have an eating disorder, they have some kind of story of their body being commented upon. And I think those kind of messages are really dangerous for women, or for anybody, men and women. And for me, because body image was such a massive identity thing, getting negative comments just helped me blossom into eating disorder.
Absolutely. So it only takes, only takes, you know, I know that you had many, 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 many different negative comments throughout the years, but it only takes somebody to say something to somebody once about their body image that they, you know, that's it. They just, their mind just runs with that. And then they think, right, okay, well, I've got to do something about that, and, you know, end up down some dark hole.
Yeah, so, it's like, you know, what you're saying, kind of a neon light, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so important that people start to be aware about how they talk to others about their body image, around food.
There's a society or a website I think it's Australian, called the Pretty Foundation, that has started, where they're encouraging us to tell young girls that they're pretty amazing, they're pretty clever, they're pretty strong, they're pretty talented, they're pretty fantastic, but they're not just pretty. So just the word pretty on its own, when we, you know, when your identity is in being pretty, well, that's never going to last, because none of us stay 16 forever. It's a very short period of your life. But two, what does it matter whether you're pretty or not pretty? You know, I look at my friends and I think, well, I didn't go and choose them on the way they looked, and they come in all shapes and sizes and heights. And, you know, I love them because they're amazing people and not because of how they look. And I think, I hope that is reciprocated. Yet we don't do that for ourselves. We judge ourselves based on how we look, even though our friends and family, hopefully for the most part, look for our value elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And Simone, what you said about the journaling, you know, for people listening, if they haven't ever not only journaling about how they're feeling and what they're thinking and their past experiences. It's so powerful to do that, to be able to get that out.
I think it's incredibly powerful. And I know not everyone, like the written word comes quite naturally to me, and it doesn't to everybody, but I don't think when you're journaling, my journaling is not good writing. It's just
yeah, it's just
it's
like a
just
brain
the
dump.
inside on the outside. And I don't think you have to try and worry about the quality of your writing. You're not writing an essay that you're going to be judged on. There's an exercise that my writing mentor gave us to do that's called dream writing that I love, and I've given to lots of people to do, where you just start with a writing prompt that might just be I feel, or today was, or whatever, and then you set a timer, and I always did mine for 15 minutes, and you have to make the pen just keep moving on the page without stopping, and just write and write and write and write and write, even if you just write I don't know what to write repeatedly, and just see what comes out. And it's a stream of consciousness kind of writing, and it's not pretty and it's not beautiful, but I've always found it incredibly powerful, especially if I don't know how I'm feeling. So yeah, I know through a lot of psychological therapies, they try and get you to engage with your emotions and see.
A lot of time. I had a client yesterday, and she was saying that she just doesn't know how she's feeling at the moment. You know, she's completely detached from her feelings. So it's beginning, and that's a really good way to do that, isn't it? To start writing down whatever comes into your mind, whatever.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
The fact is that nobody else has to read it. You don't even have to read it again. It's just a matter of getting it out there. And as you begin to unravel that, then it may become clearer about how you're actually feeling.
I think if you start with the objective that nobody will read it, then you'll do more emotive writing. Whereas if you're trying to write with an audience, there's always a filter on it. But if you're just writing and you just burn the piece of paper at the end, or delete your note, whatever it is. But it's incredibly powerful, because I think there's a lot of us wandering around, we don't know how we feel, but our body will display those emotions one way or another, whether it's through working too much, drinking too much, eating too much.
They've got to come out somehow.
It'll come out somewhere. And if you haven't got an awareness of what's going on, then you're doing everything without awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the book is on Amazon.
It is on Amazon. It's on it's everywhere, I think. It's on Book Depository and Booktopia and all those book places. So yeah, but it's definitely on Amazon. Yeah. Grab a copy, read it, and let me know.
So the book is called Stalked by Demons, Guarded by Angels. So everybody needs to go and check it out and read Simone's story. Now, if people wanted to come and learn more from you, how could they find you?
So my blog is just my name, simoneyemm.com. And then if you want to find me on Instagram or Facebook, my Facebook page, it's all just my name, Simone Yemm. So yeah. And you can contact me through those. I get excited when people send me a message or something. I always write back.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said before, it's just great for people to be able to hear, you know, other people's journeys and what they can learn from it.
I always want people to know that there's always hope. Like, I struggled with this for 50 years, and there's always hope. And I met a lady she was an anorexic. She'd been so unwell, she was on life support, but she got well in her 50s, I think, 50s, 60s. So it doesn't matter how unwell you become, there is always hope. And you've kind of got to cling to that. And if you fall down, just get back up. It doesn't have to be 9 times out of 10. It might be your 999th time that you get back up. So there's always hope.
I love that. There's always hope. There is, absolutely. And it's staying focused and having that the vision.
Yeah, I think you've got to get the information from people. Like, hearing people's stories, reading people's books, listening to the podcasts, looking at professional resources, having professional resources around you. But the more that you saturate yourself in recovery stories, I think the better chance that you have of becoming recovered as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Simone, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your journey, you know, and being so honest and sincere. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's all for today's episode. So thank you to everybody for listening, and make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes so you never miss an episode, and let us know what you think by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes or Castbox or Google Podcast or wherever you listen. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to chatting with you in the next episode.